So we think a lot at the program in the legal profession, core to our mission really is understanding law firm economics, the law firm ecosystem. And part of that is understanding the pipeline of legal talent coming into law firms. And in particular, we also study careers of lawyers and want to understand how lawyers who are just starting out find a good fit in their first law firm or their first private employer, and ultimately have careers that are satisfying to them. And so we thought it would be a great way to start off the year this year with our speaker, Bruce MacEwen, who is president of Adam Smith Esquire, and where he does a great deal of talk and consulting around law firm economics and strategy. But also has, just in the past year or so, started a venture related to JD placement in law firms and potentially improving the quality of fit in law firm placement. So please welcome Bruce MacEwen.
I really appreciate your coming out and spending your lunch hour. You saw my bio. Obviously, if you have any questions, my email is on here, bruce@adamsmithesk.com. I'm always delighted to hear from people. Seriously, I really am. What I'm going to do this afternoon is very briefly rehearse some of the statistics about JD placement in the past few years, and also some data about the big law performance, the Am Law 200, the NLJ 250, however you want to think of it. Also, the magic circle. Big firms, it's a global industry, obviously, has been for a long time. And then I want to talk about what is broken about the current, what I believe is broken about the current recruiting model for you, and some ideas about how to fix it. So I'm a big believer in data. I don't want to just stand up here and give you my opinion. So we jump right off. Bureau of Labor Statistics, legal sector employment, 10-year chart. You see it reached an all-time high in 2007. What happened in 2008? A lot of things happened in 2008, starting with the collapse of Lehman, the buy-up. Bear Stearns, a money market fund, broke the dollar. Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley ceased being investment banks as we know them. And I was an in-house securities lawyer at Morgan Stanley for many years, so I took that one hard. But you can see what happened here. And not only that, there's a continuing overhang of too many JDs being graduated compared to the economy's ability to generate new jobs that require a JD. I'm not a practicing lawyer anymore, right? And I have a JD. So, you could say that I'm a great example of somebody who's got a JD who's doing something else. But I also practiced law for like 20 years. And certainly it would have been rude if when I had gotten out of law school, I could not find a job as a lawyer, but that's what we're looking at. And note, this is every year, this projection for the next decade. Of course, the Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers also underestimate real unemployment. They include part-time and temporary jobs. Those are jobs, after all, as far as they're concerned. I find this third bullet as alarming as anything. Median private practice starting salaries down 20% in 3 years. That's a huge number. That's a huge number. We had inflation of 5-6%, which is probably 20% over 3 years, and everybody thought it was appalling. Also, there's a tremendous drop in the number of you getting jobs through on-campus interviewing. It's basically been cut in half in the last 3 years. Now that's not Harvard, that's NALP's statistics for the industry, but that's not a statistical blip. That's a huge drop. I promised a little data about big law These numbers are also pretty stark. So the orange bars show the percentage growth or decline from 2004 to 2007, the years leading up to the Great Recession or reset or whatever you call it. And then the gray bars are after that. And basically the gray bars tell a story of an industry that at best is holding its own. You might look at that and say, well, that's nice, Bruce, but those are averages, and I'm going to be an international sports lawyer or something else, right? Well, no practice area has really been immune. The only one that shows any kind of signs of life here is IP litigation. There's a lot of it, right? Apple, Samsung. Labor and employment, employment HR rules get more and more complicated. But I don't know, I didn't think I wanted to go to law school to be a labor and employment lawyer. That's your choice. But no practice area is really immune. Let's just look at a little more, and this is more from the law school perspective. This is a series going back to 1985 that shows the mean ABA accredited law school tuition. The red, the bottom series is non-residential tuition for public schools, then it's residential, then it's private, and this gray line, which starts here just sort of arbitrarily, but so you can get a sense of what it's doing, is the CPI. There's a lot of data on this. If you really want to look at this, you better ask for a copy of the presentation, and I won't bore you with it, but it shows that basically for the last 90 years, there's been tremendous growth in law school accreditation, and the ABA, that's a monopoly they own. If you want to look at it at degrees per school, the red series, or students per school, also, a fair amount of growth. How about tuition? Well, if you're going to look at numbers that are presumably comparable, you probably want to look at things like medical school, dental school, pharmacy school, maybe even veterinary school, and of course, just plain old undergrad, college. And I'm happy to report that we win. Law school tuition has been growing faster than any of those other comparable areas, whether you look at public on the left or private on the right. 5-year growth rates, this is just a different way kind of showing the same numbers, although these are real growth rates. The others I think were not adjusted for inflation. But again, if we're not at the top, we're certainly respectably holding our own. Now I put this together, but the numbers are real. So what I did was I decided let's go back almost 50 years, right? And I did it in constant 2010 dollars, so you don't have to worry about inflation. It's out. So here we have a series. The red line is public resident tuition. That's for 3 years, because if you're going to graduate, you're going to be there 3 years. The green line is Tier 1 schools, top 14. The blue line, or the green line, is Tier 1. The blue is median U.S. household income. Yellow is per capita income. It's lower than household because most households have more than one person. And then the purple line is the New York City going rate for first years. So for a long time, it was possible to argue that it was fine that tuition at law schools was going up because so were those GD associate salaries, right? But in fact, the associate salaries have not been going up for the last few years. Inflation is beginning to eat into them, and the lines look like they're about to cross. We'll see again in a year whether they actually have crossed. But that kind of puts a lot on one slide. Now, let's talk about what I think. I'm not alone, but what I think is wrong with the law student placement market. As president of JD Match, I talk to a lot of people about the hiring market. You know, hiring partners, recruiting people at law schools, recruiting people at law firms, and students. As Eric mentioned, we launched, JD Match is a startup. We launched in May 2011, so we actually had OCI last year under our belt. That was our first OCI year. The site was 12 weeks old, but you know, startups have to launch, right? So we did. And these are some of the things we heard from firms, and also we polled our student members last year, and they just, you know, they couldn't believe how frenzied it was. You'll see some of those comments in a minute. Okay, what do I think is wrong with this market? Well, I have a couple of counts on my little bill of particulars here. The first is, and understand, if you didn't have a chance to take a quick look at my bio, I was an econ major in college, and when I practiced, I was a securities lawyer. So and I did like 98% of the MBA thing at night at NYU when I was being a lawyer. So I'm a big believer in markets, okay, full disclosure. So one of the ways a market can fail is if there's insufficient information. And I think that's a classic example of market failure in OCI. There was a story in the Wall Street Journal just yesterday, you may have seen, a hiring partner who was unnamed, you know, lawyers don't want to be on the record, right? Said that it's insane to hire, you know, students 2 years in advance based on first year grades. Because for one thing, what do you take in first year? Well, I don't know about, you know, you, but I didn't take any securities law in first year. How did I know that that would be something I would be interested in? You know, I might have been able to guess, because I knew myself to some extent, but you're basically all taking the same things. You haven't sorted yourself out yet into, you know, well, you know, IP really turns me on. Now that I understand what IP is, it really turns me on. Second count of this little bill of particulars, firms are having to forecast their own demand way in advance. It's 2 years. If you do a clerkship, it's 3, right? If you do a Supreme Court clerkship, it's 4. And this does not work, right? We saw 2 classes pile up on top of each other a few years ago with incredible human consequences. I mean, this is not tiddlywinks, people. I met a kid in New York. I shouldn't say kid. We were all there. You're there. I met a guy in New York who was a second-year summer at Proskauer, great firm. I know it well. Got an offer, was deferred for a year, and then the offer was rescinded. He is now doing document review 20 hours a week, and he'd be happy to be doing more. These things have consequences. Mismatches. Basically a mismatch, and there's a lot of literature about this, including a lot of writing by Professor Al Roth over at the business school here. You'll see a quote from him in a second. There's a lot of literature about how markets with insufficient information or asymmetries going on, whatever, end up producing mismatches. And the root cause is that you don't really know what you're getting, right? Why do we have lemon laws about buying used cars that turn out to be lemons? Because the dealer knows more than you do, right, when you walk onto the car lot. Asymmetric information, that's a problem. Finally, we have this extraordinarily powerful dynamic. Everybody wants to be first. I mean, Harvard wants to be first, Berkeley wants to be first, my school, Stanford, wants to be first. Everybody wants to be first, and Skadden wants to be first, and Latham, and Debevoise, and you want to be first. You know, everybody wants to be first. Well, guess what? It can't happen. But that doesn't mean people don't try. And we got to, as part of our work with J.D. Match, we got to know a 3L at Michigan very well. He's going to Simpson. He started. They didn't, you know, defer him or anything. He's in fine shape. Don't worry. But he wrote a 50-page paper for one of his courses at Michigan about the dynamics of this failure. And he said, we know earlier in the month beats later. We know earlier in the week beats later. He said earlier in the day beats later. I mean, this is insane. So basically, you settle for good enough, right? You know, I really have my heart set on Paul Weiss, but I haven't heard from them. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with Proskauer, so I'm going to take Proskauer, and I guarantee you the next day Paul Weiss comes up with an offer. Okay, why does this work? Thank you, Professor Al Roth. Transactions involve at least two parties. Much of the benefit of a market has to do with coordination of timing, and there is no coordination of OCI right now. It's every school, every student, every firm for themselves. And you see this market dynamic a lot. Let me give you a very, very short example from history. And Ashish Nanda wrote about this a few years ago. I don't know if you saw it. The medical student hospital residency matching market, recruiting market, used to have the same structure as our market, right? World War II, you know, a medical student can only be a resident at one hospital. You know, the hospitals, it's exactly the same dynamic. Hospitals want the best residents, students want the best hospital. It got to the point, I mean, the technology is like laughable at this point, but it got to the point where hospitals were required by the AMA or whatever the equivalent was then to issue offers by telegram at midnight, and the students had to respond by telegram by noon. It sounds absurd, but it's not that far from where we are, and they actually solved it. But first, let's talk for a second about how these decentralized markets unravel. So stage one, a market comes into existence, right? At some point, there was no OCI. I don't know when that was. I went through it, you know. But at some point, there wasn't. So when the OCI market began to be sort of a recognized market, this is what happens. At first, there's so few transactions, barely anybody notices. Then it begins to be, oh, so that's how you interview Harvard law students. I get it. We'll send a partner to Cambridge. And immediately, every actor, acting rationally, you know, in their own self-interest, realizes it would be better to be first. To the point where everybody agrees this is completely chaotic. You know, you saw the quotes earlier: insanity, brutal, feeding frenzy, but nobody can agree on what to do. So typically what happens then is some regulatory body steps in. In our case, it's NALP for, for better or worse. I don't know historically, and I ought to, how that happened, but there they are. And I know Jim Leipold, their executive director. He's a great guy. It's a great organization. They provide great data, but they're trying to fix something that it's very, very difficult to fix. Again, the dynamic, we can talk about the intermediate steps, I won't, but the dynamic ends up being that a lot of participants, firms and students alike, end up with suboptimal matches, but they took what they had. Finally, these markets can be fixed if a centralized clearing market arises. I'll talk about why it's hard to get there from here, but this was the solution for our medical students and our hospitals. There arose, and that was an industry that was controlled by, I guess, the Hospital Association and the Organization of Medical Schools, whatever it was called. They could impose a centralized clearing system. And that was imposed right after World War II, 65 years later. It still is in place. Everybody likes it. It's stable. It works. How does it work? Basically, if any of you have friends who are siblings who are med students, you know how it works. Students and hospitals interview at will for quite a while. It starts, I think, in September, and it goes through March. So they have months and months and months to get to know each other. And that's entirely at will. You can arrange those things on your own. But they do have a chance to get to know each other. And hospitals then enter their list of preferences for students in a central matching clearinghouse. Students list their preferences for hospitals in the same clearinghouse, and on a day called Match Day, which is usually around March 15th, this big algorithm runs and you get matched, and that's it. You are going to St. Luke's, and St. Luke's is taking you. So you can argue that you lose control, but in a funny way you don't. JD Match also has a matching algorithm. It is not mandatory. Nothing in law land at this point could be mandatory, but it's exactly the same algorithm. It's not a public domain algorithm. We have our own copy, but or our own code, but it's widely recognized. It's used in the New York City charter schools. It's an algorithm that everybody, Al Roth would tell you it works. It runs. It's been tested. But in our case, it's market information. So if you list Paul Weiss, as your first, and Davis Polk and whatever, and go on down, when we run the algorithm, it'll tell you, were you matched with any of these firms? And maybe, if you weren't, maybe you ought to rethink things, and we'll run it again in a week. But this is the solution. The problem is it's very, very hard to get there. The NRMP jargon, National Residency Matching Program, these numbers are on the order of law land. There are about 44,000 law students who graduate every year. I doubt there are 4,000 law firms who would, hire students, but there's a lot, and there's a fair number of matches. National Bureau of Economic Research looked at over 100 markets organized this way. Only 3 had ever broken down, and they all happened for kind of exogenous reasons. Okay, why aren't we there yet? These are The first bullet really speaks to the way lawyers think. We want to be in control. And we want to feel we're in control even if the control we're exercising is not actually that effective, even if it actually doesn't get us where we want to be. We feel we're in control, but we know we're getting suboptimal matches. Nevertheless, they kind of feel like our matches, right? So that makes us feel better. Economically, the second bullet, there's a tremendous collective action problem here. Collective action challenges arise when each individual participant in a market is acting in their own self-interest, and people are acting in their own self-interest. But collectively, it leads to an outcome that is worse than it needs to be for everybody. So, you have the Alphonse and Gaston problem. Well, I'll sign up to your centralized market if Davis Polk signs up, right? Harvard will sign up if Stanford signs up. It's hard. But I'm an optimist, right? I mean, I'm an American. I've started a couple of companies. I better be an optimist. And this is what the net is really good at, providing centralized fora available 24/7, transparent information. Geography matters not. We were talking to a very tasty financial services boutique law firm in Chicago. I mean, this is a boutique firm with 100 lawyers, right? But it is a financial services boutique, probably one of the best outside, west of the Hudson. I'm revealing my hometown bias, sorry. But it's a really great firm. And where do they interview? Chicago and Northwestern, right? They don't interview here. They don't interview at Stanford because geography is limiting. Hey, online is not, there knows no geographic limits. So these are just a few examples. We get it. It does not matter where you are or what you're interested in. You can find as the most counterparties and find out exactly what they're offering, under what terms, and if it looks good, do a deal. So that's the story. I would love questions, comments, observations. If you don't want to speak up, but you have a question, email me. I truly love to hear from people, and obviously, I really, really wish you all the best of luck. Lawyer Metrics is a new company about as old as JD Match, probably, that Bill has started with some colleagues, and it is designed to determine through, I guess, psychological and behavioral interviewing and also a track record of data, what kind of people work at which law firm, right? So you probably know that somebody who's going to excel at Wachtell is probably different from somebody who's going to excel at Davis Polk. I mean, right? You just sort of intuit that. What Lawyer Metrics is designed to do is to get very granular about that. So maybe they would discover, being raised by a single mom, correlates with success at some firm, right? Maybe they would discover being a Marine correlates with success. Actually, it correlates with success at almost anything, but at a particular firm. Being a varsity athlete, who knows? But the data will tell them what works, because the firms that become LawyerMetrics clients presumably share, information on all their lawyers and who made it and who didn't. It's a very sophisticated and potentially powerful approach. JD Match is approaching, in a way, we're approaching the same problem using technology.
Right.
LawyerMetrics is very human capital and labor intensive, and you need people like Bill Henderson, right, to make it work. JD Match is online. The server in Brooklyn, that's it. That's the box. Whatever we can put in there, and we put personality tests in there. We launched a personality test 10 or 12 weeks ago, so you can fill out the 50 multiple choice questions and see your score on the classic 5-factor personality test. And we capture fluency in a dozen languages and, military service.
Do you have videos?
We are very much trying to attack the same problem of mismatches,
Yeah.
absolutely, as LawyerMetrics. They're coming at it, with the very sophisticated bespoke model. We're coming at it with technology and algorithms.
And easier access, really.
Yeah, we're free for students. Let's start there.
There's that.
Yeah. We have a, I don't want to sound like we're algorithm happy, but we do have a recommendation engine, just like Amazon's. Bruce, we have recommendations for you. So this works actually for law firm members. So because firms that join have the opportunity to rank students they like, what our algorithm can do, just like you're buying books and videos and whatever on Amazon that you like, this algorithm can look at those students. The firms don't have to lift a finger any more than I have to lift a finger for Amazon to tell me about some book I never heard of that actually uncannily sounds interesting. But this algorithm will say, oh, well, we saw that you liked Bruce and Eric and Hakeem. Here are 5 other students that you may not be aware of that look a lot like them. And it works. We ran it for one member firm last year. They said, just show us 5 students. We only want to see 5. And the 5 students were all from Tier 3 law schools with 4.2 GPAs. All 5 of them. This firm had no idea that that's actually one of the things they were looking for. But they said, oh, these students are, really interesting. Now it can go wrong, right? There was a famous story in the Wall Street Journal a few years ago. My TiVo thinks I'm gay, right? The recommendation engine gone wrong. But, so far so good. You have to meet each other, right? Welcome to the human race. You need to interview, bilaterally, mutually. That absolutely has to happen. What we believe, where we believe there's an opportunity is, first of all, for example, this really tasty financial services boutique in Chicago doesn't come to Cambridge. Well, why not? You know, go to Cambridge virtually. I guarantee you there are a lot of people here who grew up in Chicago, you know, a lot. So that's one thing. The second is, and this is my economics training, okay, you saw one of the earlier slides, one firm, it's an AmLaw 10, but still has 125 lawyers on the road during OCI. That's insane, you know. Are they going to all the top schools? Yeah, but at what cost? $75,000. It costs one firm to come here. You know, that's a lot, you know, and these are not times when firms can be throwing money around. So the answer is, are firms going to keep interviewing students? I hope so. They better. You know, but is there incremental room for a platform like JD Match to maybe provide information, market information you're free to ignore, you know, act on, think it's, well, I'll give that some weight, in ways that don't currently exist. We think there is a market, absolutely, for that. One of the other questions we get, and maybe this was in the back of your mind, but I'll anticipate it. You know, well, you know, I'm on Harvard Law Review, so I can have my pick. Yeah, you probably can. You probably can. But when the day comes that most of the elite firms belong to JD Match, and we'll get there, you know, we're in this for the long run, we'll get there. Wouldn't it be interesting to know that you were actually matched with Simpson and not with Cleary? That's interesting information. One thing we introduced several months ago is, I alluded to it, but maybe people don't know what it is, faceted search. So if you've ever bought shoes on Zappos, right, you've used faceted search. I want, you know, men's dress, lace up, black, right? Okay, so it's highly intuitive. So we did the same thing with firms. You know, you can sort by size, over 1,000 is one, you know, cutoff, under 50 is the other end. You can sort by region. New York City is its own region, you know, so is Boston, that's okay. Northern California, you know. You can sort by type of firm, you know, so global, IP boutique, Magic Circle is a category if if you're interested. And you can concatenate these. So if you do, you know, global, New York centric, you're going to get Cleary. You're going to get Sherman and Sterling, you know. So you can find firms that way. Then when you find them, and you know, we all know who Cleary is and who Sherman and Sterling is, so that may not be also all that terribly helpful. But we have like 350 firms in the database. So what if you're looking for a regional firm in Arizona? You know, I couldn't name one off the top of my head, but they're there. I guarantee you they're there. And when you see the results, you just mouse over the firm name, and there are hot links to the firm's site and, to the extent there are listings, now Above the Law, Chambers Associates, and Vault. So we don't actually provide this information because there's all these other sites that are providing it, and that's not our business. But you can do your research right within or from our site. My view, and you know, we could be wrong, is that if we move towards a centralized market, other things will change. For example, and critically, students will decide they actually need to learn more about firms and not just the usual suspects, if I may say so. But that, you know, your career services people will get an upgrade in their jobs. Instead of scheduling 20-minute interviews in August, you know, they'll be able to try to really advise you. You know, have you heard about Chapman and Cutler, this boutique in Chicago? Because I think you'd be interested, Bruce. You know, you seem to like securities law. Maybe if things move a little deeper into the second year, you know, the med thing lasts until March, right? That's better than September. You know, you learn a lot, presumably, between September and March. My point is, I think what you're describing is pretty accurate today. What I'm saying is that you never change one and only one thing in a complex system. When you begin to change one thing, other things change as well. And, you know, call me naive, but I really think more information, more curiosity, more research has to be better. Well, thank you all.
I think we're getting to the end of our time. I want to thank our guests. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.